Okay, so let's take a look at this full flow. So first we've got to set up the chucks. Remember, we're going to go fist width distance apart between those chucks. If you have the Goata mat, it's helpful to place it right in between on this midline of the 45-degree pressure wave. That way I can use the markers to help guide my kneecaps pointing out or pointing in towards the midline. So once I have my chucks set up, fist width distance, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to step onto the chucks and I'm going to find that eggshell heel alignment. So I'm going to remind myself of my standing drills. I'm going to find those 3 green dots. I'm going to try to get very light in the heel. I'm going to use that chuck for awareness. I should already notice the decompression that's coursing up through the heel bone, lifting that inner ankle bone high. I find a good starting spot. Now I need to go and I need to iso hold the first portion of this exercise. So I want to find the squat at a halfway hold. So if I have a weight in my hands, I can keep it tight to the chest for a little extra sort of guide down into the hole, or I could even push that weight out in front of me to help me counterbalance, all right? I could also do this without a weight. So the choice is yours. You can hold the weight tight, you can reach it out in front of you, or you can go with no weight, hands out in front, or hands in tight. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work myself down into the halfway range, almost like I'm gonna sit in a chair, but I'm not going to rest on it. I'm gonna feel like that chair is being pulled out from behind me, and I want to hold and control this position. So I want to make sure that my tail is reaching back and the crown of my head is reaching forward. So I can do this by placing one hand at the lower back, one hand at the crown of the head, and just go ahead and move teeter-totter relationship. So as the tail goes back, the crown has to go forward. So I can start that awareness drill really once I get my feet on the chucks. So once I'm in position, go ahead and reach the tail back, reach the crown forward, soften the knees. Notice that my kneecaps are pointing out from the second toe on these lines right here. Then I'm just going to drop down into the halfway range. Now, if I have a mirror in front of me, I want to try to make sure my head's not leaning to the right or leaning to the left. I want to take the same concept that I had in child rockers. I'm going to split my pressure 50-50 between the columns. Once I find that halfway hold, I'm just going to sit. Once again, the weight could be right here. The weight could be right here. There could be no weight. Either way you want to work it, we're going to first just find the isometric shape of the squat in the halfway range. So I can sit here and hold for time. Then I could do the same thing with my halfway fold. Same idea. Eyes are up, tail is back, crown is forward. Keeping the legs straight now, I'm going to point the kneecaps inward. Okay, so as I bend the legs, the kneecaps point out, the butt gets closer to the ground. As I lengthen and I straighten the legs, the kneecaps point in, the hands get closer to the ground. So my squat is my landing. My hinge is going to transfer and take my torso forward. So you should feel sort of this up, forward, and in through the thigh and the shin bone on top of a stable foot platform to a halfway point, almost like I'm going to take a bow. And I'm going to hold this position and try to find the wall. So you're going to run into a wall here at some point. You want to find that wall, and you want to continue to squeeze against that wall by taking those thigh bones and shin bones and turning them inward towards that midline to the point where they're actually going to cross-eye. And I want to find that halfway range. Now, once we've established halfway squat, halfway forward fold, we can play a little bit of a pulse. Small oscillations around that halfway point. So I drop down into my squat. I could take small little pulses at this halfway, or I could make them a little bit larger. And I could do almost a full halfway squat, if you will. And then I can take that pulse and I could work it into my halfway hinge. So I can take small, little sort of choppy corners just to try to kind of push against that wall and break through, create a little more space. And then the same idea, I don't ever want to go ahead and thrust the hip forward, but I can kind of find this beginning range. If you feel tight, feel like you're struggling to get this sort of pelvis, thigh bone action to be felt properly through the system as you're cornering, just taking this early portion of the range in either the squat or the hinge helps me feel that action that I need as I go down for the further range eventually when we get to 202. So I'm going to find that sort of pulse, and then I can flow halfway, halfway. Once again, if I have my weight in my hands, generally speaking, it's easier to reach the hands out with the weight bring the weight to the chest, and then go to the halfway fold. Notice, knees bend, kneecaps point out. Knees straighten, kneecaps point in. All the while, I'm using the chuck for just a little bit of traction, okay? So it's just letting me sort of not move my heel, keep it straight, keep the second toe straight, but I'm not burying my pressure into that heel bone. So this chuck helps lift the inner ankle bone high, gives me the space, the alignment through that navicular wall and the cuneiform bones between the big toe and the inner ankle bone, that apex that I actually need. So now I can open and close my ankle. I also have to recognize that my foot and my ankle are probably a little glued together. So creating a little bit of traction there on the chuck to where you get a little stick through the heel as you turn, but also finding a space where you're not dumping the pressure into your heels. That's a fine line that gets a lot clearer as you keep doing these reps. All right, so the goal is to take those cadences, the iso, the pulse, and the flow, and work them. We really don't want to give you a strict set of time or a set of reps. This is purely feel. We're trying to go for a burn here. We're trying to get into that lower back pocket area and still create that same fatigue that we started to notice in 201. Now, as I get closer to the halfway range, it's okay to feel a little bit more burn through the whole leg, including the quad area, just because we're sitting at that halfway range. So don't be alarmed if that starts to show itself. When you get into these sets, if you're going with a hold and then you're pulsing and then you're flowing, you're doing all of that in one setting on the chuck, you're going to wear out the whole system, but we still want to make sure that we're going for that back chain recruitment. So I do want to feel like the lower back and the back pockets are taking most of the pressure down into my outer calf. And then obviously the foot is going to feel like it's getting a lot of work here as well. So those are the sort of cadences or tempos. But big picture, the idea is we're on these chucks. They're helping get us into a better foot position so we can claim that foot control that we need. And we are going to take these crucial pre-movement fundamentals of my squat and my hinge, and we're just going to break them up. So the 201 is going to be a halfway point of those movements. 202 will then go into the full range. And then from there, we can start to work into our single leg.